Hi there, it's Neil here, one of the developers of Zulu Response. I've got open the single player game configuration menu in front of me. I just thought I'd go through some of the options available which you can set prior to starting up a game. The options here are almost identical in the network games as well, so what I explain here will be equally relevant for a network game. So if I start off on the tiredness, for example, the tiredness is a value you can set to on or off, and when it's set to on, that affects the British player and the AI that the player commands. Specifically for the player, it affects their ability to run and move. So the more you move, the more tired you become, and then your pace will slow, and in which case you need to pause to recover. In terms of the AI, the British AI that you command, whilst you can't see the AI's pace the speed at which they move doesn't change. What it does affect is their ability when they're in battle. So the more tired they become, the slower they will react in battle. So as I said, it's a British setting. It affects the British, not the Zulu. The wall capture is a setting that affects only games on the Rorke's Drift map at this point in time. So for another game type, as another setting, it's not available. So at Rorke's Drift, part of the game's objective is for the Zulu to capture the walls, and to capture a wall they have to make breaches in the wall, and what this does is specify whether you need to make all breaches. So each wall can have up to 10 breaches, so 10 breaches in a wall to capture it, or 60%, in which case it's only 6 out of the 10 to capture the wall. So obviously if you're playing as Zulu and it's set to 60%, that's an easier setting, and if you're playing as British, then 60% is a harder setting. The impy attacks, that's related to how often the a Zulu wave will attack the British or become available to attack the British. So in addition to the AI that a Zulu player or the Zulu have at the disposal, you can also from time to time a chief will spawn nearby a player, and when it spawns you can request a wave of Zulu to attack a particular location, target area that you assign, and this value sets the frequency that how often the chief will appear and make these attacks available. So low means it's not very frequent, so therefore it's harder if you're playing as Zulu, and a high means it's more frequent and therefore be easier as Zulu but harder as the British, because you get more Zulu attacking you. The command distance, think of that as whether the AI that you command are they within hearing range. So if there's no restriction, that means you can issue commands to move or direct your AI from anywhere on the map. But if it's restricted, that means you have to be within a certain distance of the warriors or the soldiers for them to actually action your command, so within hearing range. Iron sights, on or off, that affects the guns, whether you have a crosshair on or off. The player dives, there's a number of values for this. So for example, you can have a hard setting, so if you die in game, the game is over. So you only get one chance. The end game setting is not available in the network games, but these next two options are. So you also have, I'll look at this one first, is the respawn and no deduction. So that's essentially like most games, how most games play. So you spawn, and then if you die, you respawn again, and so on and so forth. But if you have this spawn and the deduction, this is you could think of it as a discouragement for the run and gun type of mentality. So it means that if you die, for the British, 2 reserves of your soldiers' reserves are deducted from that you have available, and for the Zulu that means 5 reserves are deducted. Bearing in mind you only have a set number of reserves, so when you're reserves and you have no soldiers or warriors to command, then you're out of the game. So the more times you die, the more reserves you lose, and the quicker it is you may find yourself out of the game or losing the game. The squad tag, that's a value. It's as a default set to off, but each player has their warriors and their soldiers. So when you go into battle, and there can be many warriors and soldiers in a scene, in which case you may not know which warriors or which soldiers are yours. Are they have they slightly moved off? In which case it's hard to find them, because there's a lot of characters in the scene. So to make it easier, you could either have your name or a small dot that will appear above the head of the warriors or soldiers that you command. Now, in a network game, if you have this value set to be on, then you only see the dots related to your AI or your soldiers or warriors. You don't see the other player's dots or name. Otherwise, it would just be a screen will be full of dots and AI, names, which we don't particularly want. So you can choose to have that on or off. So to whether you want to make it easier or if it's set to off, you can have it more realistic. The cowardice is a value that's it's related to the morale setting for the British. So it only impacts the British, the AI. So the higher the value, that means the greater the likelihood when morale is reducing that a soldier will desert, and in which case when a soldier deserts you lose a soldier from your reserves. So it can impact how the British player may play, because obviously if you start losing soldiers because of the desertion, then you may find yourself out of the game quicker. So therefore you need to be aware of the morale and try and take steps to increase morale of your troops. Obviously the lower the setting, then the less likelihood that when morale drops a soldier will desert. The Zulu and soldier attacks are basically similar settings, except one applies to Zulu and one to soldiers. So the higher the setting, which we have here for the Zulu, means the higher the number, the greater the frequency that the AI of that particular class will look to retarget an enemy. So the higher the number, they will fight more aggressively, and the lower the number, they won't fight as aggressively. So in this instance you have the Zulu, which will be more aggressive than the British, because of the British got a lower number. Should also point out though that the higher the number, the more intensity the battle, and therefore the more stresses you're putting on your system as you play the game. So you could, if you've got an older style rig, you could actually lower the settings, for example, in a single player game to make the game maybe be more suitable for your particular rig. The reserves, for example, will differ between whether you're playing Zulu or British. So in this case, for British, the maximum reserves you can have is 20, and if you're playing a Zulu game in single player, you could have up to 150. So it varies. So obviously more reserves you have, the easier the game is for you to play. and these settings are available in network as well. Same sort of settings. There's some other settings we have which are applicable. The same applies both network and the single player. You can adjust the settings for each particular weapon, or the impact of each weapon or action, such as the melee or the damage that they do. So you can tailor each particular one. So for example, a value of 100 would mean that if any hit would be instant death to whoever that player hit. So you could obviously make that a much lower value, so it would take over nearly 3 melee hits to kill someone, because the 100 being the maximum, reducing the health. Some other settings we have. You can set the game timer, changes the length, that how long you want the game to play. The tag above the chief, that's similar to the squad tag. I mentioned earlier that related to the impy attacks, that a chief will spawn by near a Zulu player, and when he spawns nearby, because the player may be constantly moving, you may find that you've now run behind a load of bushes, or there's a whole lot of other Zulus, or you might be engaged in the middle of a battle, in which case it's very hard to then spot where's the chief. Now you can backtrack the way you've just run, which is the logical way to find the chief, or you can make it easier by having a small tag that will appear, which is visible across the whole of the map, so you can actually find the chief much easier. It's up to you whether you want to have that on or off. Auto reload, have that on or off. The impacted by fear, that only affects the British players and the British AI that they command. So if the fear is set to on, then the player will be subject to fear from time to time, such as the Zulu chants. So therefore, it would be slightly harder for them to aim their weapons while they're experiencing fear. The same applies to the player's AI as well. They will be slightly less effective when they're experiencing fear. So you can choose to have that on or off. The slow injured, that's for the Zulu warriors. When their health reaches a certain level, you can have them either slow to a limp, or you can have them just run constantly, which is slightly easier if you can see that a particular AI is injured. Then you know that you can maybe target them. So obviously if it's set to off, then you don't know which particular AI is health is low. And then your blood splatter, on or off. The spawn cycle, once this is a network game setting, so for the Zulu players, so you could have the chief that spawns only on the leader only, and therefore the leader only makes decisions where to attack, so he can coordinate, direct any attacks, or then plan them, or you can rotate between the players. It's up to you how you want to set that. Turning circle, you can configure how tight or not so tight, how sensitive the turning is on a horse, for horse maps. We also have some other settings which you can utilize for network games to potentially help any particular frame rates, for example, on a host. Or bear in mind that the host computer is actually taking a lot of the load, so these don't necessarily affect those players joining the server. So you could reduce the number of AI available to each player. So you could effectively halve the AI that the player commands in game. The percentage of warriors in game, that's related to the the chief, the chief spawns and how many warriors in a wave will launch an attack. So you can reduce the number of warriors in game if you choose. There's other settings you can set specific for network games in the particular config file, such as ping kickers, passwords, whether you want to protect your game, you want to kick or ban a player. There's various other passwords there for this server, so you can have someone else issue a kick or a ban. And these are relevant whether you as a player host the game yourself. So you can still set these, and you also have your map cycle, so you can set a cycle of what maps you want to, how you want to rotate the games.